They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it comes perfectly plated at a five-star restaurant. I never thought I'd be telling this story, but life has a way of serving up the most unexpected moments right when you need them most. You see, when Sarah decided to bring her lover to our anniversary dinner, she had no idea she was walking into my empire. But let me start from the beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I met Sarah at a charity gala in Chicago 6 years ago. She was this vibrant marketing executive who could command attention just by walking into a room. Designer dresses, perfect smile, and this infectious laugh that made everyone want to be part of her world. I was just a guy with a dream back then, working long hours in restaurant kitchens and saving every penny to open my own place someday. The connection was instant. She loved how passionate I was about food, or at least that's what she said. Looking back, maybe she just loved the idea of molding me into something else. Cooking is a great hobby, she'd say, her tone dripping with condescension, but you need a real career. I should have seen it then. The way she viewed my ambitions as something cute, something to be corrected rather than supported. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? Or maybe I just didn't want to see. Sarah came from money, old money. The kind of wealth that's worn like armor, used to keep the common folk at arm's length. Her father was a hedge fund manager, her mother a socialite who treated charity events like competitive sports. They never approved of me, of course. A chef? Her mother had asked during our first meeting, saying the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. Darling, surely you can do better. But Sarah defended me then, or at least I thought she did. James has potential, she'd say, as if I were a fixer-upper house in a good neighborhood. He just needs some guidance. I was so in love. I mistook her condescension for support, her control for care. We married 2 years after meeting, a lavish affair that her parents insisted on paying for. We can't have our daughter getting married in some budget venue, they'd said. I swallowed my pride and let them have their way. That should have been another red flag. How easily Sarah let them dismiss my input. How she seemed more concerned with impressing her social circle than starting our life together. The first few years were good, or maybe I was just too busy to notice they weren't. I worked double shifts at high-end restaurants, learning everything I could about the business side of things. During the day, I met with investors, refined my business plan, and searched for the perfect location. Sarah seemed supportive on the surface, but there was always an undercurrent of disappointment. Another late night at the restaurant? She'd ask, not looking up from her phone. You know, Mark from my office just made junior partner. He has this gorgeous summer house in the Hamptons. The comparisons were constant, the implications clear. I wasn't measuring up to her expectations. What Sarah didn't know, what I deliberately kept from her, was that I was building something bigger than she could imagine. Every time she made a snide comment about my kitchen work, I channeled that energy into my plans. While she was busy climbing the social ladder and attending her charity luncheons, I was quietly building an empire. Restaurant by restaurant, location by location, I kept my success quiet, letting her believe I was still just a chef at someone else's restaurant. It wasn't hard. Sarah never asked about my work, never showed any real interest in my world. She was too busy with her own life, her own ambitions, and as I would later discover, her own secrets. The signs of her infidelity were there if I had wanted to see them. The late nights at the office, the mysterious business trips, the way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. But I was focused on my goals, on building something meaningful. Or maybe, like those early warning signs about her character, I just didn't want to acknowledge what was right in front of me. Then came the turning point. Our 5th wedding anniversary was approaching, and for once, Sarah seemed interested in making plans. "Let me handle it," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "I know this amazing new restaurant downtown. Very exclusive, very hard to get into. I pulled some strings. If only she knew just how exclusive it was, and exactly whose restaurant she was talking about. What I didn't tell Sarah was that the amazing new restaurant she was talking about wasn't just any high-end establishment. It was the crown jewel of my restaurant group, La Maison Azur. The irony of her choosing my flagship location for what I'd later discover was her twisted plan still makes me laugh sometimes. I remember the day I signed the lease on the first restaurant. Sarah was at another of her charity galas, probably complaining to her friends about her husband's lack of ambition. I stood in that empty space with its worn floors and peeling wallpaper and saw nothing but possibility. My investor Marcus stood beside me, shaking his head with a knowing smile. "You sure about this, James?" he asked, gesturing to the abandoned restaurant space. "This place needs a lot of work." Marcus was different from other investors I'd met. While most saw numbers on a spreadsheet, he saw passion and determination. He became more than a business partner. He was the mentor I never had, the believer. "Sarah never was. Trust me," I said, already envisioning what it could become. "This location, the history of this building, the potential, it's perfect." And it was. Within 6 months, we'd transformed that empty shell into something extraordinary. The reviews were stellar, the reservations impossible to get, and the profit margins exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Sarah, of course, remained oblivious. She was too wrapped up in her own world to notice that I was coming home. Later, not because I was working as a line cook, but because I was overseeing the opening of my second location, then my third. By our 5th anniversary, I owned a chain of 6 high-end restaurants across the city, each more successful than the last. The staff at La Maison Azur became my second family. Eleanor, my general manager, ran the place with military precision and unwavering loyalty. She knew about Sarah, about the facade I maintained at home. "Why don't you tell her?" she asked one night, after overseeing another flawless service. I remember pausing, swirling the glass of Bordeaux we traditionally shared after closing. "Because she never believed in this dream," I replied. "She never believed in me. And now I want to see how this plays out." Elena nodded, understanding as always. She'd seen enough of Sarah's behavior during her rare visits to my other restaurants, always complaining, always treating the staff with barely concealed disdain, never realizing they all worked for her husband. But it was David, my head sommelier, who first noticed something was off about Sarah. He'd seen her dining at our sister restaurant, La Petit Jardin, with a man who definitely wasn't me. "Boss," he'd said hesitantly, "I don't want to overstep, but—" I appreciated his loyalty. But I already knew. The signs had been there for months. The mysterious phone calls, the sudden business trips, the way she'd changed the subject whenever I asked about her day. The man's name was Richard Blackwood, a senior partner at her firm. Tall, distinguished, exactly the kind of man Sarah's parents had always wanted for their daughter. I had my security team pull the reservation records. They'd been dining at my restaurants for months, always requesting private booths, always paying in cash. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so painful, but I kept my cards close to my chest. I immersed myself in work, in expanding my empire, in creating something meaningful. While Sarah thought I was stuck in a dead-end job, I was negotiating deals for new locations, earning write-ups in major food publications, and building a reputation as one of the city's most successful restaurateurs, all under a different name, of course. My staff became experts at maintaining the charade. They knew not to acknowledge me when Sarah rarely visited any of my restaurants with her colleagues. They played along when she acted like just another demanding customer, never letting on that she was treating the owner's employees with such contempt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Their loyalty was impressive, but then again, I'd always believed in taking care of my people. The day Sarah announced she'd made reservations at La Maison Azur for our anniversary, I felt something shift. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was karma, but watching her smile smugly as she told me about the exclusive restaurant she'd managed to get us into, my restaurant, I knew the charade was coming to an end. The question was, how would I play? This hand I'd been dealt? Elena's face when I told her about Sarah's reservation was priceless. "You're kidding," she said, her usually composed demeanor cracking slightly. "She actually booked your own restaurant for—" She trailed off. Realization dawning. "She's bringing him, isn't she?" I nodded, already formulating a plan. It was time to show Sarah exactly who she'd underestimated all these years. The week leading up to our anniversary was surreal. Sarah was different, more attentive, almost giddy. She kept talking about how special this dinner would be, how she had big news to share. I played along, pretending to be touched by her sudden interest in celebrating our marriage. If she noticed the bitter edge to my smile, she didn't. "Show it." I spent those days making preparations of my own. La Maison Azur wasn't just any restaurant in my collection. It was my masterpiece. 5 stories of culinary excellence in a restored Victorian mansion, each floor offering a different dining experience. The crown jewel was the rooftop garden, where I'd installed a glass-enclosed private dining room, offering panoramic views of the city skyline. It was, ironically, where Sarah had requested to be seated. "The table she asked for," Elena reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. "It's your private table." She was right. That particular spot was reserved exclusively for my use, a fact that made Sarah's request even more audacious. She'd apparently pulled strings with her firm's client relations department, who'd called in a special favor to secure the space. The same space I'd designed with my own hands. My staff was on edge. They'd witnessed Sarah's behavior at my other restaurants over the years. The condescending comments, the complaints about service, the way she'd snap her fingers to get attention. But this was different. This was personal. "What do you want us to do?" David asked during our pre-service meeting. The loyalty in his eyes, in all their eyes, was overwhelming. "Act normal," I instructed, though nothing about this situation was normal. "Treat them like any other VIP guests." Then I smiled, allowing a hint of mischief to show. "But maybe we give them a dining experience they'll never forget." I spent hours in the kitchen that week, perfecting a special tasting menu. Each dish told a story. Our story, though Sarah wouldn't realize it until later. The appetizer was a refined version of the first meal I'd ever cooked for her. The fish course featured the same rare Japanese snapper we'd had on our honeymoon, the one she'd dismissed as nothing special. Each plate was a memory, each flavor a reminder of what she'd chosen to forget. Meanwhile, Sarah's excitement about the dinner grew more obvious, more suspicious. She made 3 different hair appointments, bought a new dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and spent hours on the phone in hushed conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I knew she was planning something dramatic, probably her grand exit from our marriage, but she had no idea just how dramatic this evening would become. The staff watched her coming and going from my other restaurants with Richard throughout the week. Elena kept me updated on their meetings, the intimate dinners, the lingering touches, the way they thought they were being discreet. "They were here again last night," she reported, her voice filled with disgust. "At La Petit Jardin. Private. Booth, usual champagne order." The champagne in question was a rare vintage I'd sourced specifically for my restaurants. The irony of Sarah and her lover celebrating their affair with wines I'd personally selected wasn't lost on me. I maintained my facade of ignorance, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband perfectly. When Sarah asked if I'd managed to find a suit nice enough for such an exclusive restaurant, I assured her I'd wear my best. She didn't know that I had a private wardrobe at La Maison Azur worth more than our first house, or that the suit I planned to wear cost more than her lover's. Monthly car payment. The pieces were falling into place. Elena had arranged for our best servers to work that night. David had selected wines that would pair perfectly with each course of my specially designed menu. The kitchen team was practicing each dish until they achieved absolute perfection. This wasn't just about exposing an affair. It was about showing Sarah exactly what she'd failed to see all these years. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked when I told him my plans. He'd stopped by to review some expansion proposals, but really, I knew he was checking on me. You could just serve them a regular dinner, let them have their moment, and deal with the fallout privately. I considered his words, watching the sunset from my office overlooking the city. "She chose my restaurant, Marcus, my special table. For this?" I shook my head. "No, if she wants to make a statement, let's make sure it's one no one forgets." The day before our anniversary, I received final confirmation of Sarah's plan. My security team forwarded me footage of her meeting Richard at my second restaurant, discussing their big surprise for tomorrow night. They thought they were being clever, planning their dramatic revelation in plain sight. They had no idea they were sitting at my bar, drinking my wine, plotting their grand gesture in my house. The morning of our anniversary dawned bright and clear. Sarah was practically glowing as she got ready for work, humming to herself as she applied her makeup. "Don't forget, dinner's at 8, she reminded me, her voice honey-sweet. "Please, don't be late. This place is really exclusive about their reservations." I nodded, playing my part in her little performance. "I'll be there," I promised, watching her check her reflection one last time. She'd chosen a red dress that probably cost more than what she thought I made in a month. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was dressing to impress in a restaurant I owned, preparing to break my heart in a building I'd renovated with my own vision. Throughout the day, my phone buzzed with updates from my staff. Elena sent me hourly reports about the preparations. The private dining room was being decorated exactly to Sarah's specifications. She'd requested white roses, her favorite. Little did she know that the roses came from my own greenhouse, where I grew specialty ingredients for my restaurants. Richard just called to confirm his part of the arrangement. Eleanor texted around noon. He wants champagne waiting at the table. The expensive kind. I had to smile at that. He'd specifically requested a rare vintage that I'd personally sourced from a small vineyard in France. The same champagne they'd been drinking during their secret meetings at my other restaurants. David, my sommelier, was particularly upset about the whole situation. "Boss," he said during our afternoon meeting, "they want to use your private wine collection for this. The absolute nerve of them." He was right. Sarah had somehow convinced the restaurant's client relations department, who were actually my employees, to access my personal wine cellar for their special evening. I spent the afternoon in my private office at La Maison Azur, watching the security feeds as my staff prepared for the evening. The special menu I'd designed was being executed perfectly, each dish a carefully crafted message, each course telling part of our story. The appetizer, a delicate seafood dish, was inspired by our first date. The main course featured Wagyu, beef from a farm I'd personally visited in Japan, a trip Sarah had refused to take with me, claiming it was too pedestrian for her tastes. Around 6, Elena knocked on my office door. "Everything's ready," she reported, her professional demeanor slightly cracked by concern. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? We could always tell them the table is unavailable, create some sort of emergency. I appreciated her loyalty, but this needed to happen. "No," I said, standing to adjust my tie in the mirror. "Let's see this through. Is everything in place for the video system?" She nodded. The private dining room was equipped with state-of-the-art cameras and sound systems, ostensibly for security purposes. Tonight, they would serve a different purpose. "All feeds are running to your private monitor, and we've got backup recording set up. Whatever happens in that room, we'll have it documented." At 7:30, Richard arrived. My security team tracked him as he entered through the main doors, looking confident in his tailored suit. He spoke briefly with the maitre d', confirming the special arrangements he'd made. The staff played their parts perfectly, treating him like any other VIP guest, while discreetly keeping me informed of every move. "He's brought something with him," texted one of my security team. "Small box, probably jewelry." Of course, a parting gift for Sarah, no doubt. The final twist of the knife they planned to deliver tonight. I watched from my office as Sarah arrived at 7:45, looking radiant and nervous. She was shown to the private dining room, where Richard was already waiting. The look they shared when she entered, intimate, excited, conspiratorial, might have broken my heart if I hadn't already seen it so many times on my security feeds from other restaurants. Elena appeared at my door one last time. "Your table is ready," she said, her voice professional but her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Would you like to make your entrance now, or should we serve the first course?" I stood, straightening my jacket. "Let them have their moment," I replied, watching the monitor as Sarah and Richard clinked champagne glasses, my champagne, in my restaurant at my table. "Let them think everything is going according to their plan. Then we'll show them exactly whose house they're sitting in." The stage was set, the players were in position. Now it was just a matter of timing, letting them dig their own grave just a little deeper before I made my presence known. After all, if they wanted to make a statement, they should at least have the right audience for it. I watched the monitor as they settled in, as Richard poured more champagne, as Sarah laughed at something he said. They looked so comfortable, so sure of themselves. They had no idea they were about to star in a very different kind of dinner, theatre than the one they'd planned. From my private office monitor, I watched as Sarah and Richard settled into their evening, completely unaware of the storm about to break. Elena had positioned cameras perfectly. I could see every subtle touch, every knowing glance, every moment of their betrayal in crystal clear detail. The champagne flowed freely as they whispered and laughed, probably congratulating themselves on their clever plan. "First course is ready," Elena messaged. "Should we proceed?" I texted back a simple yes, and watched the carefully choreographed dance begin. My staff moved with practiced precision, each playing their part in this theatre of revenge. The appetizers arrived. A dish I'd created specifically for this moment, butter-poached lobster with gold leaf, served on ice sculptures that slowly melted to reveal hidden messages. Sarah had always loved theatrical presentations. Through my earpiece, I could hear their conversation. "This is incredible," Sarah gushed, sampling the lobster. "How did you manage to get a reservation here? I heard there's a 6-month waiting list." Richard preened under her praise, adjusting his silk tie. "Let's just say I have connections. Only the best for tonight's announcement." The irony of their conversation made me smile. Richard's connections were actually my employees, playing along with their little game. Every special arrangement they thought they'd cleverly orchestrated had been carefully managed by my team. The private dining room, the rare wines, the custom menu, all of it designed to create the perfect setting for their moment of truth. Elena appeared at my office door, her tablet in hand. "They've just requested the special champagne for the main course," she reported, her voice professionally neutral, but her eyes blazing with controlled anger. The one you imported from that small French vineyard. I nodded, remembering how Sarah had once mocked my interest in wine, calling it a wasteful hobby. Now she was drinking my carefully curated collection, probably thinking she was being treated to the restaurant's best. Through the monitors, I watched as David, my sommelier, approached their table with the requested bottle. "An excellent choice," he said smoothly, presenting the label for their inspection. "This is from a very special private collection." Sarah barely glanced at him, too engrossed in whatever Richard was whispering in her ear. The same Sarah who'd constantly criticized my lowly career in restaurants couldn't even be bothered to acknowledge the staff serving her. The temperature in the private dining room was perfect, the lighting intimate, the music a soft background to their betrayal. Every detail had been orchestrated to their specifications, or so they thought. In reality, each element was part of my design, creating the perfect stage for what was to come. "Main course is ready," the kitchen messaged. I'd chosen each dish, with purpose. The Wagyu beef Sarah had once declared too expensive for my salary, the rare truffles she'd said I'd never be able to afford, the gold-flecked dessert she'd seen in a magazine and dismissed as not in our league. Tonight, she was consuming my success, bite by precious bite. Richard was getting nervous. I could see it in the way he kept checking his phone, adjusting his tie, glancing at the small box visible in his jacket pocket. They were building toward something, their own dramatic reveal. Sarah kept touching her neck, a tell she'd had since I'd known her. She was excited, anticipated, completely oblivious to the real drama about to unfold. Elena's tablet buzzed with another update. "They've just ordered the special dessert wine," she reported, "and Richard asked for the staff to be ready with their cameras. Apparently he's planning some sort of announcement." Of course he was. They wanted their moment documented, their clever plot captured for posterity. Little did they know about the other cameras already recording their every move. Through my earpiece, I heard Sarah excuse herself to the restroom, probably going to freshen up before their big moment. Richard immediately pulled out the small box, checking its contents. A necklace, no doubt, or perhaps a ring. Some expensive trinket to mark their new beginning, funded by the money he made working for the firm where they'd first met. "Boss," Elena said softly, "the main course will be ready in 5 minutes. Are you sure you want to wait? We could end this now." I understood her concern. Every moment we let this continue felt like another twist of the knife. But timing was everything. Let them have their appetizers, their wine, their intimate moments. Let them think everything was going perfectly to plan. I watched Sarah return to the table, her lipstick freshly applied, her eyes bright with anticipation. Richard reached for her hand across the table, probably rehearsing his speech in his head. They were so caught up in their own drama, so certain of their clever plan, that they failed to notice the subtle shifts in the room, the staff moving with increased purpose, the private elevator humming to life, the slight change in the lighting that signaled the beginning of the evening's real entertainment. The main course arrived with perfect timing, just as Richard was reaching for the box in his jacket pocket. Elena had choreographed the service perfectly. 3 servers entered. Simultaneously, their movements synchronized like a ballet. The silver cloches covering their plates gleamed under the custom lighting I'd installed for moments exactly like this. "Your main course," announced the lead server, his voice carrying just the right note of ceremony. "Chef's special preparation of A5 Wagyu beef, accompanied by black truffle risotto and seasonal vegetables from our private greenhouse." Sarah's eyes widened at the presentation. She'd always been impressed by expensive things, though she thought I'd never be able to provide them. "Richard, this must cost a fortune," she whispered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "Are you sure?" He waved off her concern with the casual arrogance of a man spending someone else's money. My money, though he didn't know it. "Only the best for tonight," he replied, reaching again for that box. Through my earpiece I heard him clear his throat. "Sarah," he began, "there's something we need to discuss." Here it was, their moment of revelation. I watched Sarah's face light up with anticipation, her hand already reaching across the table toward his. But before he could continue, Eleanor executed the next phase of our plan. David appeared at their table, seemingly apologetic. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," he said smoothly, "but I have a rather special wine pairing the chef insisted on for this course. It's from his private collection, very rare, very exclusive." The interruption clearly irritated Richard, but Sarah perked up at the word exclusive. She'd always been drawn to anything that seemed elite or private. "Oh, we must try it then," she gushed, not noticing Richard's annoyance at having his moment delayed. Through the cameras, I watched David present the bottle with expert precision. It was a wine Sarah had once seen in a magazine, exclaiming over its price tag and lamenting that she'd married beneath her station. Now she was sipping it in my restaurant, about to announce her affair with another man, completely unaware that every sip was courtesy of the husband she thought was working a late shift at some casual dining chain. The wine was poured, the glasses clinked, and Richard tried again. "Sarah, these past months have been—" He paused as one of my servers appeared to adjust their place settings, another perfectly timed interruption. I could see his frustration mounting. The evening wasn't going quite as smoothly as he'd planned. Meanwhile, the rest of my team was executing their roles flawlessly. The lighting subtly shifted, the music changed to something with just a slightly quicker tempo. The temperature dropped just 2 degrees, all calculated to create an almost imperceptible sense of unease. "Is everything all right with your main?" "Of course." Eleanor approached their table, clipboard in hand. "The chef wanted to ensure it meets your expectations." More interruptions, more delays, each one carefully planned to build tension. Richard was practically squirming in his seat now, his carefully orchestrated evening falling slightly off kilter. Sarah, oblivious to his discomfort, was too busy photographing her food for social media. "This is amazing," she gushed, probably already planning the caption. Another dig at her husband's modest career while flaunting her access to luxury. If only she knew she was photographing my creation, my success, my vindication. Through my earpiece, I heard Richard finally lose patience. "Could we please have some privacy?" he snapped at Elena. "This is supposed to be a special moment." Elena apologized professionally, but I saw the slight smile she couldn't quite hide as she withdrew. She knew what was coming. "Sarah," Richard tried again, reaching for that box, "I think it's time we made some changes in our lives. You deserve better than—" He gestured vaguely, presumably referring to me and our marriage. "You deserve someone who can give you all this, all the time." I watched Sarah's face soften, her eyes getting misty. "Oh, Richard," she breathed, reaching for his hand. This was it, their big moment, their dramatic revelation. They thought they were the stars of this show, about to deliver the perfect scene in the perfect setting. Elena appeared at my office door. "They're about to do it," she said quietly. "Should we proceed with the final phase?" I stood adjusting my tie and checking my reflection in the window. Everything was perfect. My custom suit, my designer watch, all the trappings of success that Sarah thought I'd never achieve. "Let them have their moment," I replied, moving toward the private elevator that would take me to their floor. "Let them think they've won. Then we'll show them what a real plot twist looks like." Through the monitors, I watched Richard finally pull out the box, watch Sarah's eyes light up with anticipation, watch them lean toward each other like conspirators about to reveal their master plan. They had no idea they were about to become supporting characters in a very different story. The private elevator hummed softly as it carried me upward. Through my earpiece, I could hear Richard finally having his moment. "Sarah," his voice was thick with practiced emotion, "I think we both know this isn't just a normal anniversary dinner." You could say that again, though not for the reasons he thought. From my vantage point in the elevator, I watched the scene unfold on the small monitor Eleanor had installed. Richard was holding the box now, not yet open, but prominently displayed. On the table between them, Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement, her champagne glass forgotten. "When we first started working together," Richard continued, oblivious to the staff's subtle movements around them, "I never imagined we'd end up here. But life has a way of showing us what we really deserve." I had to admire his audacity. Delivering this speech in my restaurant, drinking my wine, sitting at my private table. Elena's voice came through my earpiece. "Kitchen is ready with the special dessert course. David has the ceremonial champagne standing by. Security teams are in position." Everything was orchestrated down to the smallest detail. This was my house, after all, and timing was everything. Sarah reached across the table, tears glistening in her eyes. "Richard, these past months have been like a dream." She glanced around the opulent dining room. "This is the life I was meant for, not—" She waved her hand dismissively. "What I've been settling for." The elevator stopped at the private mezzanine level, one floor above their table. Through the one-way glass, I could see them perfectly while remaining hidden. Richard was opening the box now, revealing what appeared to be a platinum necklace, probably purchased with his latest bonus, the one Sarah had pointedly mentioned during our last argument about my lack of ambition. "You deserve every luxury," Richard was saying, lifting the necklace. "Not just tonight, but every night. Not just in stolen moments, but in the open." The irony of his words, delivered in my establishment, almost made me laugh. Sarah was nodding, eagerly, already reaching for the necklace. Elena appeared silently at my side, tablet in hand. "All cameras are recording," she whispered, "every angle covered." I nodded, watching as Richard stood to fasten the necklace around Sarah's neck. His hands lingered there, an intimate gesture that would have hurt if I hadn't already known about. "Their affair for months. There's something else," Richard said, returning to his seat. "Something we need to discuss." He reached into his jacket again, producing an envelope this time. "I've had my lawyer draw up some papers. Everything's been arranged. All you need to do is—" He paused for dramatic effect, clearly pleased with himself. "Say yes." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. "Richard, are you saying—" She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. This wasn't just about their affair anymore. They were planning their future, right here in my restaurant, using my carefully crafted ambience as the backdrop for their betrayal. Through my earpiece, I heard David's voice. "Boss, they've just ordered another bottle of your private reserve champagne. Should I proceed with service?" I pressed the small button on my cufflink to respond. "Let them have it. One last toast before the curtain falls." I watched as David approached their table with the champagne, his movements deliberate and precise. Richard was still talking, laying out their perfect future together. "I've already found us the perfect penthouse," he was saying. "My firm's partners are fully supportive. Once the divorce is finalized—" Divorce. There it was. The word they'd been dancing around all evening. They had it all planned out. The dramatic revelation, the expensive gifts, the promises of a better life. They thought they were being clever, choosing my most exclusive restaurant for their moment. They had no idea they were performing on my stage. Elena checked her tablet one last time. "Everything's in place," she confirmed. "The staff is ready. Security is standing by. All we need is your signal." I straightened my tie, checking my reflection in the mirrored wall. The bespoke suit, the designer watch, all the trappings of success that Sarah thought I'd never achieve. Everything was perfect. "Let them finish their champagne," I said, watching as David poured the golden liquid into their crystal flutes. Let them have their moment of triumph. Then we'll show them what a real power play looks like. Through the one-way glass, I watched Sarah raise her glass, her eyes shining with tears of joy. To new beginnings, she toasted, her voice carrying clearly through my carefully designed acoustic system. Richard clinked his glass against hers, smiling like a man who thought he held all the cards, if only they knew what was coming next. The moment had arrived. I pressed the small button on my cufflink, signaling Elena to begin. Instantly, the lighting in the private dining room shifted, the intimate amber glow replaced by bright, crystal-clear illumination. Sarah and Richard blinked in surprise, their champagne glasses still raised in their celebratory toast. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena's voice carried through the room's hidden speakers, "please welcome the owner and executive chef of Le Maison Azur." The private elevator doors opened silently behind their table. I stepped out, adjusting my Brioni suit jacket, the same brand Richard wore, though mine was custom-tailored. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally, horror. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, but David caught it with practiced ease before it could shatter. Richard just stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Please, don't let me interrupt," I said, my voice carrying easily through the stunned silence. "You were discussing new beginnings, I believe." I moved to the head of the table, noting how Sarah seemed to shrink in her chair. The necklace Richard had just gifted her glinted under the bright lights, probably purchased from the same jeweler who supplied the decorative pieces throughout my restaurants. "James," Sarah managed to whisper, her face pale, how are you?" She glanced around wildly, suddenly seeing the room with new eyes. Every luxury detail she'd been admiring all evening now took on a different meaning. Richard was still frozen, the envelope with divorce papers clutched in his hand. "How am I here?" I finished for her, signaling David to pour me a glass of the champagne they'd been enjoying. "Well, it's quite simple. Welcome to my restaurant. Or should I say, one of my restaurants?" I took a deliberate sip, savoring both the wine and their expressions. "The wine you're drinking? From my private collection, that Wagyu beef you just enjoyed? I personally selected it from a farm in Japan. Even that private table you thought you'd cleverly secured, it's my personal table." Elena stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Shall I show them the security footage from our other locations, sir?" she asked professionally. Sarah's face, if possible, went even paler. Richard finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. "Other locations?" "Oh yes," I smiled, settling into one of the vacant chairs. "Le Petit Jardin, where you had your first business dinner 3 months ago. Café Milano, where you celebrated Richard's promotion last month. The River Room, where you planned tonight's little performance." I gestured around the room. I own them all. Sarah's hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. "All this time," she whispered. "All those nights you were working late." I nodded, enjoying how the pieces were falling into place. In her mind, I wasn't just working in a kitchen, Sarah. I was building an empire, the same empire you're sitting in right now, planning to leave me in. Richard attempted to regain some control of the situation. "Now, look here," he started. But I cut him off with a raised hand. "The cameras are still rolling, Richard. Would you like your firm's partners to see how you've been spending their client entertainment budget in my restaurants, plotting an affair with a married woman?" The blood drained from his face. His firm was one of the city's most conservative investment houses. A scandal like this would destroy his carefully crafted reputation. Sarah looked between us, her carefully applied makeup starting to smear from the tears forming in her eyes. "The necklace looks lovely, by the way," I continued conversationally, "though perhaps a bit obvious for an anniversary dinner with your husband. Speaking of which..." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder of my own. "I have some papers." "For you as well," Elena stepped forward, placing a thick document folder on the table. "These are the ownership papers for all our restaurants," I explained, watching Sarah's eyes widen as she saw the numbers. "And these," I pulled out another set of documents, "are my divorce papers, already filed this morning." "You knew," Sarah whispered, realization finally dawning. "All this time you knew." I smiled, taking another sip of champagne. "I knew everything. Every dinner, every lie, every dismissive comment about my little career in restaurants. I watched you both, sitting in my establishments, drinking my wine, plotting your future while looking down on me." Richard started to stand, but two of my security team materialized beside him. "I wouldn't," I advised. "We're not quite finished with dinner, and you wouldn't want to miss dessert. It's a rather special presentation I've prepared just for this occasion." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah sat there, tears now flowing freely, ruining her perfectly applied makeup. Richard kept glancing between the security guards, the door, and his phone, probably calculating his chances of damage control, but I wasn't done yet, not even close. "Elena," I said calmly, "would you please show our guests the presentation we've prepared?" She nodded, tapping her tablet. Instantly, the private dining room's walls transformed into screens, a feature I'd installed for business presentations, but now served a different purpose. Security footage began playing from multiple restaurants, Sarah and Richard's entire affair documented in high-definition video. "You see," I continued, as they watched themselves on screen, "when you own a restaurant chain, you have access to quite a lot of interesting technology. Security cameras, reservation systems, credit card records." Richard's face grew increasingly pale as he realized the extent of the documentation. "Your firm's accounting department might be particularly interested in how you've been coding these dinner expenses, Richard." Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "James, I can explain." I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Explain what, Sarah? How you mocked my career choices while spending my money? How you laughed with Richard about your unsuccessful husband while sitting in my restaurants? Or perhaps you'd like to explain the real estate brochures I found, the ones for properties you could finally afford once you traded up." Elena stepped forward again, her tablet displaying a new set of figures. "Should I show them the financial reports, sir?" I nodded, watching as the screens shifted to display the valuation of my restaurant group. Sarah's eyes widened as she saw the numbers, millions upon millions in revenue, property holdings, wine collections, all under my management. That's impossible," she stuttered. "You're just a chef." I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Just a chef? Sarah, I own the largest independent restaurant group in the city. That little cooking hobby you love to dismiss, it built all of this." I gestured around the room. "Every time you complained about my lack of ambition, I was negotiating a property deal. While you were planning your exit strategy, I was planning this moment." Richard finally attempted to regain some control. "This is harassment," he declared, though his voice wavered. "You can't just—" "Can't what?" I interrupted. "Document people dining in my own establishments, share business records with relevant parties. Please, do explain to me and your firm's ethics committee exactly what I can't do." David appeared with a dessert cart, his timing impeccable as always. "Your special anniversary dessert," he announced, lifting the silver cloche to reveal an elaborate presentation. In the center was a replica of our wedding cake, though this one was decorated with printouts of their text messages, dinner receipts, and security photos, all artfully crafted in edible ink. "I've always believed presentation is everything," I commented, watching Sarah's face crumple as she recognized some of their more intimate exchanges displayed in chocolate and gold leaf. "It's all about attention to detail. Wouldn't you agree, Richard? Like noticing when your mistress's husband owns every restaurant you've been using for your affair." Elena cleared her throat softly. "The media representatives have arrived downstairs, sir. They're quite excited about covering the special anniversary event you mentioned." Sarah's head snapped up, panic clear in her eyes. "Media?" she whispered. "Oh, yes," I smiled. "After all, the city's largest restaurant group throwing a special anniversary celebration. It's quite newsworthy, don't you think? Though perhaps not the celebration you had in mind." Richard finally broke. "What do you want?" he demanded, his former confidence completely evaporated. "Money, a settlement, name your price." I laughed, the sound echoing off the now silent walls. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. This is about consequences. Actions have them, you see, and it's time for both of you to face yours." I stood, straightening my jacket. "Now, you have two choices. You can leave quietly through the back entrance, though I should mention that your firm's partners are currently enjoying dinner in my main dining room, Richard. Or you can stay, finish your dessert, and smile for the cameras when they come. Up to cover this spectacular evening. Your choice." Sarah was openly sobbing now, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Richard looked like he was about to be sick. "You planned all of this," Sarah managed between sobs. "You let us walk right into it." I smiled, picking up my champagne glass for one final toast. "Let's just say, revenge, like a fine wine, is best served at exactly the right temperature." The story exploded overnight. In today's age of social media, it's impossible to keep something this dramatic under wraps, especially when it involves one of the city's most prestigious restaurant groups. By morning, shaky cell phone videos taken by other diners had gone. A viral restaurant revenge was trending, and every local news outlet was running the story. "Restaurateur serves cold dish of revenge to cheating wife," screamed one headline. "Fine dining meets divine justice," declared another. The videos showed fragments of the confrontation. Sarah's shocked face, Richard's failed attempts at damage control, the elaborate dessert presentation that laid bare their affair. Each clip added fuel to the viral fire. Elena had been fielding calls non-stop since dawn. "Good Morning America wants an interview," she reported, scrolling through her tablet. "So does every local station. The Food Network just called. They're interested in doing a special." The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah had always wanted to be famous in our city's social circles. Now she was, just not in the way she'd planned. Richard's firm acted swiftly. By 9 a.m., they'd issued a statement announcing his voluntary leave of absence pending investigation into misuse of company resources. His corner office was being packed up while he desperately tried to explain to the ethics committee how he'd managed to spend hundreds of thousands in client entertainment funds wooing a married woman in her husband's restaurants, no less. Sarah's carefully curated social media presence imploded. Her Instagram, once filled with posed photos at charity galas and subtle digs at her underachieving husband, was flooded with comments. People were ruthless, turning her previous posts into memes. "Living my best life." "Blessed," read one of her recent captions, posted from one of my restaurants. The comments below it now were scathing. "Yeah, until your best life got served the..." Check! My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from friends and industry colleagues. Most had known about my success, of course, but had kept quiet at my request. Now they were sharing their own stories of Sarah's behavior over the years. The condescending comments at industry events, the way she'd treated staff at my restaurants, her constant complaints about my career choice. The security footage from various restaurants had become the talk of the internet. Someone had compiled a supercut of Sarah and Richard's secret meetings, set to dramatic music. Another creative soul had turned Sarah's shocked face into a reaction GIF that was rapidly spreading across Twitter. "When you realize your side, Peace's dinner dates were funded by your husband," became a viral caption. But the real entertainment came from the financial revelations. Local business pages were running detailed profiles of my restaurant empire, complete with evaluations that made Sarah's social climbing look like child's play. The same people she'd tried to impress at charity events were now calling Elena, desperately trying to book tables at my establishments. Richard's world was collapsing even faster. His firm's partners were furious, not just about the misused funds, but about the embarrassment to their reputation. The ethics committee meeting had apparently been brutal. By afternoon, his voluntary leave had turned into a termination, his company bio scrubbed from their website. His wife, yes, he'd been married too, had already contacted one of the city's most aggressive divorce attorneys. Sarah tried damage control, posting a tearful video apology that only made things worse. "I didn't know," she sobbed into the camera. "I never realized." The internet was merciless. "Didn't realize your husband owned the restaurants, or didn't realize you'd get caught," was one of the kinder responses. The video was turned into dozens of memes within hours. Elena kept me updated on the fallout while I focused on running my restaurants. "Sarah's PR firm just dropped her," she reported, with barely concealed satisfaction. "Apparently, they don't support clients who contradict their ethical standards." The same PR firm had helped Sarah craft her social media image as the perfect wife. Now they were distancing themselves faster than Richard's firm had dropped him. The media circus showed no signs of slowing down. Food blogs were running features on the elaborate revenge dessert, complete with recipes for just desserts and humble pie. Restaurant industry publications were calling it the revenge-served cold story of the year. Even serious business journals were using it as a case study in how not to conduct an affair, especially not in your spouse's business establishments. But the most satisfying reaction came from Sarah's social circle. The same people who'd smiled politely at her jokes about my little restaurant job were now desperately trying to prove they'd always supported me. "James has always been so talented," they gushed to reporters. "We knew he would be successful." Their hypocrisy was almost as entertaining as Sarah's downfall. 2 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, I sat in my office at La Maison Azur, reviewing plans for our newest location. The media frenzy had finally started to die down, though my restaurants were still enjoying unprecedented popularity. People would request the table, everyone knew which one, hoping to sit where the drama had unfolded. Sarah had moved out of our house the day after the revelation, leaving behind only a tear-stained note about how she never meant to hurt me. I had to laugh at that. The woman who had spent years belittling my dreams, who had planned to leave me for a man she thought could give her a better life, was now living in a small apartment paid for by her parents. Her social circle had evaporated, her influencer dreams shattered, her carefully constructed image in ruins. Richard hadn't fared any better. His wife's divorce attorney had been thorough, especially after the evidence of his misused company funds, and came to light. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and most of his assets. Last I heard, he was interviewing at second-tier firms in another state, trying to rebuild some semblance of a career. Elena knocked on my office door, interrupting my thoughts. "The interview with Food and Wine is confirmed for next week," she reported. "They want to do a feature on the expansion plans." I nodded, looking out over the city skyline from my office window. The restaurant group had grown even more successful. In the wake of the scandal, something about karma being served with a side of justice really appealed to people. "Oh, and there's one more thing," Eleanor added, a slight smile playing at her corners of her mouth. "Sarah's been trying to get a reservation at Le Petit Jardin, under her maiden name, of course." I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. The same restaurant where she'd started her affair was now beyond her reach. "Put her on the permanent deny list," I replied. "Some customers we can do without." The whole experience had taught me something valuable about success and revenge. It's not about the grand gesture or the public humiliation, though those had been satisfying. It's about living well, building something meaningful, and letting people reveal their true nature through their own actions. My restaurant empire continued to thrive. We opened 3 new locations in the past 2 months, each more successful than the last. The staff, who had helped orchestrate that memorable evening, had been well rewarded for their loyalty. Elena was now COO of the entire group. David had been promoted to beverage director, and every team member who had kept my secret had received significant bonuses. The media attention had brought unexpected opportunities. A major publishing house wanted me to write a book, part cookbook, part business memoir, with a healthy dose of justice served cold. Television producers were interested in developing a series based on the story. But I was most proud of the mentorship program I'd started, helping aspiring restaurateurs build their own dreams. Sometimes, late at night, when the last customers had left and the kitchens were quiet, I would sit at that private table and reflect on how everything had changed. The table itself had become something of a legend in the restaurant industry. People would request it specifically, hoping some of its karma would rub off on their own lives. Sarah had tried to reach out several times, each attempt more desperate than the last. Her latest email was a rambling apology, talking about how she'd failed to see what was right in front of her, how she'd let superficial desires blind her to real success. I never responded. Some chapters are better left closed. The incident had sparked a broader conversation in the city's social circles about success, appearances, and judgment. Several local publications had run features on hidden successful spouses. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had kept their achievements quiet while their partners underestimated them. Elena's tablet buzzed with another update. People magazine wants to do a feature, she reported. Something about revenge success stories, when living well is the best revenge. I smiled, remembering Sarah's obsession with appearing in those same society pages that were now celebrating her downfall. The restaurant industry had embraced the story wholeheartedly. Other restaurateurs shared their own tales of being underestimated, of building success quietly, while others doubted them. My story had become a kind of modern fable in hospitality circles. Never judge a chef by their apron, or something like that. As I signed off on the plans for our newest location, a rooftop venue with views of the entire city, I realized that success isn't just about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Every doubt, every dismissive comment, every underestimation had just been fuel for my determination. The evening service was about to begin. I could hear the familiar sounds of the restaurant coming to life. Glasses being polished, plates being arranged, staff briefings being conducted. This was my world, the empire I'd built while others thought I was just working in a kitchen. And now, finally, everyone knew it. Life has a funny way of serving up justice when you least expect it. Sometimes it comes with a side of irony, perfectly plated and served at exactly the right temperature. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, you get to watch as those who doubted you realize just how wrong they were, preferably over a very expensive glass of wine in your own restaurant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.